Welcome to Medical Matters Weekly with Dr. Trey Dobson, presented by Southwestern Vermont Healthcare and Catamount Access Television.
I'm Trey Dobson, Chief Medical Officer at Southwestern Vermont Medical Center and an emergency medicine physician with Dartmouth Health. And this is Medical Matters Weekly, a show about the aspects of healthcare that matter to you most. My guest today is Nathan McKeen. He is the director of the Vermont State Parks. Welcome, Nathan.
Hi, Trey. Thank you very much.
Hey, you've got a cool background back there. For those listening on podcast, they can't see it, but if you're watching it on YouTube or Cat TV, you can see that. Is that your backyard?
Yeah, no, it's not. It's kind of everybody's backyard. This is Waterbury State Park in Salisbury, Vermont. It's one of our most popular state parks for camping and for day use, not far from Middlebury. And it backs up against Green Mountain National Forest. So it's a lot of great stuff going on there.
Well, it's fantastic. I can't wait to hear more about it. So Nate studied forestry at the University of Maine, worked for state parks in both Connecticut and Vermont, served a couple of years, 2.5 years in Senegal, West Africa with the Peace Corps. So I can't wait to ask some questions about that. And done many other things, led the grounds department at Shelburne Museum and began with the Vermont Department of Forests, Parks and Recreation as a park manager at Little River State Park in Waterbury. And then many other things. So Nate, tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from and how you got into forestry.
Sure. I grew up over in Freiburg, Maine, which is right on the New Hampshire border at the foot of the White Mountain National Forest over near North County, New Hampshire. And my family, it's a small town, and my family is rooted in sort of the working landscape in terms of their livelihood, farming, logging, sawmill. So I spent a lot of my time growing up working on or around the land or just observing people doing that when I was younger, and spending all of my free time outdoors on our land or the neighbor's land, and just spending a lot of time in the streams and lakes and forests over there in that area of New England. We did have the benefit of having Freiburg Academy in town, so that's where, similar to St. Johnsbury Academy, I think, locals would go there as their public high school, but we had folks coming in from all over the country and the world to go to high school there. So it was a great combination of growing up in a rural area with sort of a real window on the world from those relationships that you built from the other students that came from outside the area.
Sure. And did you see a connection early? You talked about between yourself and the outdoors. How do you apply that towards your sort of physical and mental well-being?
Yeah, I think it's the importance of the outdoors is just more of a cultural thing. It's not necessarily something that you suddenly realize. Like I said, we spent a lot of our free time outdoors as kids, and when you don't have the chance to be outdoors, you realize you miss it. And then if you get outdoors and you haven't had a life where you spend a lot of time outdoors, you realize what you've been missing and what you can gain. I have two daughters. They're in college now, and they just sort of learned on their own. If they get frustrated or upset, they'll often say, I'm going to go for a walk in the woods. And they come back in a better mental place. And I do that as well. So there's a real connection. I like to think that, being outside, sitting quietly in contemplation is a lot different than doing that in your living room. There's a lot more out there. And when you're outside, you're just naturally apt to be more active. Walking is, for example, is so powerful. And you can walk around your house, you can take a walk in the woods, or in the field or on trail, and it really relaxes you, calms you, invigorates you. You realize you're accomplishing something, and there's so much to just recognize and acknowledge out there. It's magical in many ways, and the more you're out there, the more you realize that, particularly here in New England with the 4 seasons. Sometimes the most invigorating time to be outside is when the weather's not great. But you realize there's a whole lot of other things going on, whether it's well below zero or 95 degrees. and you're walking down to the stream. So I really think it's when you're outside, it's spiritual, and that's a benefit to everybody. I would say that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd just add that I
it-
think one thing I've realized over time is being a part of nature is something we all have to learn to do, and there's so many benefits to that. Versus, and I think in a lot of ways, our culture has led us to think that more of consumption of nature and conquering of nature is the way to be outside, and really that's not as invigorating and healthy, I'll say. And I think the key to our future is understanding nature and living with it.
I love how you're, equating not only the physical connection, but also the spiritual connection, because it is so important. When we think about a lot of the research that's been ongoing in medicine for the last decade or so about being sedentary and how being sedentary equates to other health risks, including smoking and other lifestyle choices. And if you think about when you go outdoors and you spend some time outdoors, it's pretty hard to be sedentary. I mean, you may sit down by a nice tree and read a book and have the wind blowing through your hair, but mostly you're up and moving about. And that's actually not the case when you're in a home or office environment. Yes, you might move around, but you sit much more than you recognize. And I think that's what the literature is showing. So there's the physical connection, but then there's also the spiritual or mental connection that you were talking about, which is the clarity, the freedom from distraction of electronics and others. That's so important. Let me ask you a question that seems so obvious, but what does a forester do? How do you spend 4 years studying forestry? I happen to know the answer to this because many of my friends are forestry. They majored in natural resources at the University of the South in Tennessee. But I'm always curious because people think, did you just sit around and learn about trees?
Yeah, well, that's certainly a big part of it. And it's you learn a lot about trees and even more about the ecosystem and the forests and the ecosystem services that open space and forests contribute to. And just how complex a forest is, even here in New England, where we don't have the variety of species that folks have in other areas of the country or in the tropics. But the connection and the complexity in a stand of trees or in a forest is really remarkable, and it opens up your eyes to that. And managing a forest, whether it's for recreation or forest products, or just wildlife habitat. It's a complex undertaking, and you learn all about that. And it's not an easy major, actually. I realized when I was in the middle of it, but it is invigorating, and there's all kinds of aspects of it, just like any other career, whether it's tying your profession to recreation or, like I said, habitat, or just forest management for timber products and or urban landscapes. Urban forestry is huge. You walk around some of our towns and cities and you realize the foresight folks had in planting some of these trees. And if you have a shade tree on your street or along your street, aligning your street, it's a huge asset. And we have to really reinvigorate our efforts to urban landscapes because with climate change and heat domes and just more concrete and pavement in cities, we need more natural gardens and urban trees. So it depends on which way your career goes. Mine happened to go more toward recreation and forest management, but it's a wide field, and I think it's a great one.
And
yeah.
You talked about managing the forest and all the benefits there, and then there's the mismanagement of forests when you don't have the right people involved, and that just leads to so many problems like those you mentioned. You're fortunate in your position to, I'm certain, work with collegial mindset in most of the efforts that you do. Although I imagine sometimes some of the initiatives you want to do may be counter to what either other government agencies are looking at, or land use opportunities. Do you find that you are comfortable in your job in Vermont in being supported in the efforts that you're trying to promote with the parks?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I will say, as in terms of being a government agency, there are challenges with that, but we have many fans, and we're looked upon very favorably, and we work very closely with our forestry counterparts, in environmental conservation when we want to do some development or protect some shoreland and water quality, and certainly with Fish and Wildlife. We have great partnerships with the other parts of the agency all over the state, and also with historic preservation. So we have many partners throughout the state, and in general, I will say I'm glad we're in a small state like Vermont compared to some of my counterparts across the country in terms of just working through the variety of bureaucracy that can be part of government. So in general, we're always looking to raise our profile, get more support, but we do feel very supported, and by the legislature and by just Vermonters themselves.
Yeah, that's so important, and I agree with you. It's another reason I'm glad I live here and recreate here and make a life here. Now, without going into too much detail, and not to put you on the spot, but tell us a little bit about the differences in what a state park is versus a state forest versus a national park. I know this can roll off your tongue easy. You could probably talk for 30 minutes on this subject, but I personally, as an outdoor enthusiast, get those questions all the time from individuals. So if you could just elaborate on how you would answer those questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, we have to remind ourselves all the time that, yes, we're Vermont State Parks, but really what we are is part of a public land community. And folks don't necessarily care that much whether something is a state park or a town park, state forest, or national forest. Really, most of us just want to know what we can do, where, and how it benefits the state and Vermonters. So often we do get mixed up with other parts of the national forest or municipal parks. We don't get mixed up a lot with our state forests because many of our parks are embedded in a state forest. For example, Little River State Park, where I was a manager quite a while ago now, that is embedded within the Mount Mansfield State Forest. So there's just all kinds of public land activities that happen next to or in Little River State Park, from forest management, wildlife habitat, to just a whole network of great trails, mountain biking. The Waterbury Reservoir is right there. So there is a difference certainly in how we're governed, how we're funded. But in general, it's all about public land management and working together and making sure that we're improving it for the long term, taking the long view, which is not easy when folks really want to know day to day what they can do, and they want to see some services added sometimes, and so do we. But we really are only being responsible when we do take the long view, which is a big part of the forestry profession too, taking the long view even when short-term outcomes are more in demand.
Right. I'm sure you can have catchphrases such as, we're making this park not for you, but for your children, and things like that are
That's a good
so
one.
important.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Let's see, tell us a little bit about the Peace Corps. I always find, my friends who did the Peace Corps, I respect tremendously. How did you get interested in the Peace Corps? And then tell us a little bit about being in Senegal.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate you asking that. Really, the Peace Corps was a tremendous gift for me. I kind of got connected with the idea in college because there was a demand at that time, and there still is, for natural resource-based professions. And out of college, I wasn't really ready, but it was always in the back of my mind. And then after working for the Department of state parks in Connecticut for a couple of years, I went to see the recruiter at University of Connecticut, and he really encouraged me to apply, and it's not a slam dunk to get accepted. And so it kind of developed slowly, and then you're off on this adventure, and it's a commitment. But I found that, that 2.5 years, of course, flies by, and the other service work I've done, whether it's school boards, conservation commission, ambulance service, coaching youth sports, I've always really gained a lot more than I feel I've contributed. And a lot of that is because of the things you can get involved in, the things you learn about, and the people you get connected with. And in Senegal, I'll say at my age at the time, from the other folks that were there serving with me in the Peace Corps from the US, just their spirit, their intelligence, their outlook on society elevated me in a lot of ways and got me thinking much broader than I really had thought before. And then even more importantly, the Senegalese people. You're initially in such a foreign, strange land with a strange language. People that really don't necessarily live like we do here. But it doesn't take long to develop some close connections and realize that we're all humans, we're all people, and we live differently, but we have nothing on them in terms of our quality of life, our intelligence. It's more about being a person and realizing when you start conversing with folks and get comfortable with the language, listening to the conversations, you realize you could be having the exact same conversations back here in the US, whether it's about the weather, the crops, the family, finances, religion, politics. It's just all the same. And it seems so incredibly foreign at first, but it really isn't. It's just humans being humans. So it was a great experience. I did a lot of work with tree plantations and planting trees in amongst the crops, a lot of vegetable gardening. And once I got a bit of a handle on the language, doing a little bit of environmental education in the schools. But again, I really didn't have anything on them in terms of what I knew or my intelligence. It was more about just organizing and galvanizing some spirit of action. And the more I separated from being there, the more I realized how much more I gained than I really gave. So it was a great experience.
I love how you use the word, Nate, intelligence, because really, and I know this isn't exactly where you're going, but really it's diversity of experiences and diversity of people that you meet that bring intelligence through awareness. And without that, you develop a myopic view of the world that is frankly incorrect. And you jumped right on the fact that when you went there and started meeting people, it was strange to you because you hadn't experienced that, but that you quickly realized, hey, any preconceived notions I had are wrong about these folks or any probably other folks that you would have. And I think that's so important. I'm actually going to tie this back a little bit because I know some of the audience might say, hey, where's this going? I thought this was a podcast about healthcare and topics that matter to you most. And this is exactly what matters to our health, our wellness, our well-being. And that's why we have topics on outdoor activities, in addition to the latest cardiac surgeries. These are all important things in our overall growth and really finding joy in life. But I'll stop there because the audience wants to hear from you, not from me. So let me go back and ask you to talk a little bit about the current situation with Vermont State Parks. Just in general, without a map here, tell us a little bit about the number of parks and not necessarily where they're located, because that would take you a while, but how people can access them and other things.
Yeah, good job bringing it back. The Vermont, for such a small state and actually a small state budget, has an incredible network of state parks. We're really blessed with our state park system. And I think that goes back to the 30s and the Civilian Conservation Corps. And there was a big push to start some state parks back then and build them quickly, a lot quicker than we could now. And then another push in the 60s and 70s, where more parks were developed. And 55 state parks is what we have officially, where we have staff and you register to go in. And there are a lot more other recreation areas that aren't really necessarily that developed, that are state parks, as part of the state forest. But we like to say we have 55 state parks, and one nice thing is they're spread out all around the state. If you're down there near Bennington, you have Shasbury State Park, Emerald Lakes State Park, Molly Stark State Park. Everywhere you go, we just about anybody living in Vermont, you're a half an hour or less from a state park. So one thing I will mention, support is really important for us. We're funded primarily through the fees that we take in through day use and camping. Some other states just set up differently than Vermont. They get a bigger share of just general fund tax dollars. So we tried very hard to make sure we're doing a very good job and making it worth the fee that folks pay to come camp and go in for the day. And if you're talking about going in for the day, we have many frequent user pass options for locals. And we have 2,200 campsites, which is a lot for Vermont, many more than many other states. And that includes regular tent sites, cabins, lean-tos, some cottages, which you can rent for the week, and they have everything, including linen. So the variety is just tremendous, and the how well they're spread out and what they offer is really a gift for Vermont. And we're coming up on our 100th anniversary of Vermont State Parks in 2024. So we're not young either, and we really want to have a blowout celebration of the park system in a couple of years. So I think that's, I've traveled around and visited every state park multiple times, and I can say that every park that I'm in, I make a note, I've got to bring the kids here. This is going back many years, because every park is so different and so unique, but also very well cared for. And the staff that we have operating them, we have over 400 seasonal staff that we bring in every year from all over the country. And they take great pride in the work that they do. And the parks are well maintained and very special and unique, each one of them.
It's anecdotal just based on my experience, but I agree on the staffing. I've always just been really impressed with the way I've been greeted by staff. Could be a terrible rainy day, no one's hardly there, yet they are just as excited to see me. And I also appreciate that you brought up the funding issue. I think a lot of people don't realize that. They assume they have, quote, already paid for the park through their tax dollars. And therefore, maybe not so intentionally, but they may not work hard to deposit that money, the day use fee, because, they don't necessarily have to, who's watching them. And really, they need to do that. They actually would be better off joining for longer term use. And that's how they're supporting the park, and not through taxpayer dollars as much as you said. I learned that a few years ago. I did think that it was all funded through taxpayers, and that those fees were just there to, prevent the park from being overrun with people. But that's not the intent at all. So tell us a little bit about, I had written down here a couple notes about the Vermont State Parks Challenge and how families and individuals can get involved with that.
Yep, we're always looking for a way to get folks engaged, particularly with their kids in the parks and even on our website. And the challenge is quite popular. It's been going on for a number of years now. And basically, we develop a series of activities every year, and you get a little booklet, and you go around and you do these activities, take pictures of them while you're doing them. And you get a number of points for each activity. And once you reach 250 points, you get a really nice medallion. I think I have one here. And this is like an individual pass. Whoops, I don't know if you can see that, but a special pass that gets you in to the state park for the rest of this year and all of next year. You just show that medallion or wear it with pride. And we've had many families that do it every year. Many kids have done it, and it's just a real keepsake. And it's just a way to try out different things in different parks, and stay engaged that way. We also have our Junior Ranger program, which is kind of similar, but it's tied to a particular park that you're in, and you can do certain activities and get your Junior Ranger badge, which is it's great for kids. There's so much to do in a state park, but we always try to make sure there's more than enough to do, including our nature programming. We have interpreters in a number of our parks, and they are doing a lot of programming for park visitors. Dances,
for the parents out there, it's great for the parents out there. I also cannot stress enough, as Nate has just done, the importance of getting your children out there for these types of activities, which may kind of seem silly at first until you get into them. It's a great way to spend time with your child, but also they remember it. It has an impact on them. Then they grow up and they are more healthy because they have been exposed to the outdoors. They understand the benefits without listening to a podcast like this. And furthermore, they vote, and they vote to protect lands, which is also really important. Nate, you mentioned something earlier, the Civilian Conservation Corps. I remember specifically being extremely young. I have no idea, maybe as young as 5, out on a hike, maybe with family or maybe with just through a camp type experience, and seeing carved in the rock, 1933, I think it was, CCC. I still remember this, and asking, what is that about? And someone explaining to me the whole thing: depression, getting people back to work. And one of the ways that they were doing that was environmental work to preserve lands. I still remember that so much today, and I have to say it probably influenced a lot, or part of the influence of my love for the outdoors. So as we conclude here, tell us what you're looking forward to professionally over the next few years.
Well, we have so much going on. I really feel like we're on the cusp of a whole new era when it comes to outdoor recreation and the value and importance of parks. I'll just add, and bringing it back to the health, we have the park prescription program.
Yes.
Where through the governor's commission on physical fitness, a number of doctor's offices around the state, they can write you a prescription to go visit a park, and get you a free pass into a park, and you get to go there and tell your physician that you did something active. So I wanted to get that in because of the nature of this podcast. But coming up, like I said, I think parks are going to be more important than ever going forward, only growing in importance. Our 100th anniversary is going to be a big one. We're really hoping to engage the community, Vermont community, on that, and hear some stories about that experience they've had over the years or over generations in state parks. One thing that really happened quickly this year, which is a real indicator, I think, of the connection between parks and well-being and health, is the Agency of Education. They purchased 12,000 seasons passes for their folks, that their educators and support staff around the state.
Wow.
And that gets all those educators into state parks for free all season. And also the Child Development Services, they did the same thing for their child care center staff around the state. And it was really, really popular. And it's a great thing that we want to build on, letting folks know about this opportunity and having companies provide their staff, as part of their wellness program, passes to state parks, and building support and awareness that way. I would like to mention Vermont Parks Forever. They're our partner not-for-profit organization. That organization was stood up probably 8 or 9 years ago now, and they are really, really helping us do a better job in some of those areas that we have been limited in just because of capacity and resources, but are really, really important to us, which is improved access. So for increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion for folks who are first coming to Vermont from another country, or helping us recognize First Nations, Abenaki, communities and their role in Vermont and even on public lands. And then also helping us improve our natural connections program through helping us build some nature centers and improve our programming around the state. So they're a key not-for-profit partner. They do some fundraising. They have a really active board. So I definitely want to highlight those folks there, vermontparksforever.org. So that's exciting, very exciting. They're going to help us observe our 100th anniversary. We've been organized kind of the way we're organized now for about 30 years. And we have engaged a consulting company out of Portland, did a RFP and a bid process, and they're going to really help us take a deep dive into our park system, how we are funded, how we're structured, and make sure we're set up for the next 100 years, help us. So it's not just us and our internal think tank, we're bringing in some outside experts to help us grow. So that's exciting, and that's going to be happening over the next year. And we just want to keep learning and doing a better job of raising awareness of state parks, this is helping. I appreciate that. And making sure we're connecting folks to the state parks, and there's an awareness and understanding around the state, how important we are for the economic benefit, the health benefit, community, the communities in Vermont, and how many people we bring from out of state. About half of our campers come from out of state. And overall, we have over 1 million visitors every year. So that's a lot of people coming to Vermont to recreate. And Vermont is so special. And it's 80% of it is privately owned. So that public land is really important. I find I consider it a great equalizer. State parks are the everyman's, beach house, open space, not posted. So it's really, really important. So I think raising that awareness is going to be important for our future too. So there's a lot of exciting stuff going on.
Yeah, that was an incredible list. Thank you so much, Nate McKeen, for joining us today.
Thank you. Great talking to you.
You too. I'll also thank Mike Cutler from CAT TV and all the staff at CAT TV, Ray Smith from Southwestern Vermont Healthcare, Ashley Jowett from Southwestern Vermont Healthcare. I'm Trey Dobson. Go out and find joy in everything you do, even in the face of adversity, and we will see you next week.